Have a desire to take your conversation to its highest potential? If you do, hop on over to my website and check out the School of Reform. Yes, school is most definitely in. Knowing Bible is the course that I am now offering to take your conversation to its next level. Grow closer not simply with the philosophy that is within the Bible, grow closer not simply with the devotional character of the living God, but grow closer with yourself also. So head on over to my website, check out the School of Reform, and check out Knowing Bible. This is the course for the learner that wants to make their life, both personal and devotional, more full. Chapter 10 breakdown of the book, Perfecting and Reforming Personal Religion. And we last left, or the previous chapter ended with the thought of we have the option for what type of life we want to live. And this life not necessarily being or primarily being our natural life, our daily life. This is a given. We know that we can live however we want to live naturally. But when it comes to our devotional character, when it comes to how we carry our religious thought or perspective, this doesn't really transfer so easy. We don't really know that we have the option to live outside of the scope of our either adopted, inherited, or self-cultivated tradition for our religion or theological perspective. We can understand that I can dress how I want to dress, I can think how I want to think, I can do what I want to do. I have the option, I have it. But when it comes to our belief, when it comes to our spirituality, and I'll say it like that because that might hit a little harder. When it comes to our spirituality, we don't really believe that we have the right, the option, the right or the option for what type of life we want to live. And when we do, we feel wrong about it, or we feel scared about it. We feel as though we're violating something. The institutional understanding of it is correct, and the way I want to live isn't going with the institutional understanding of it. Or I'm in the institutional understanding, but something's wrong. We don't know for some reason, and it's difficult to see that just as we have a natural life, our faith also has a natural life. Our faith has a natural life of its own. That's really foreign to us because we're not naturally built to understand that. In the scope of where our faith is coming from, we're coming from a community-based organization, mentally and physically, where everybody does what everybody does and everybody believes what everybody believes, and so the train of thought for life is exactly where that thought and belief is and what it's associated to and with. And so we don't think about, I have a personal belief, and that personal belief just might need to get fed more than my public belief. Because that's what it comes down to. We mistake our personal belief for being our public belief, and so our public belief covers the sphere of what is external and internal when it comes to our conscience, our devotional conscience. But, there comes a point in time where our faith is going to start to grow and develop, And it's going to start to need things where the institution cannot supply them. It's going to need to be where the institution is not. It's going to need to be where the understanding that we have received by tradition, by mother, father, or by pastor so-and-so, or by institution, this and that, isn't feeding what is needed within. And so it's weird. It's weird when the body of our faith goes, hi, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm here, I need an experience. And then we're just like, okay, listen, chill. Human being got this. You can just settle under the experience of the human being and we can all be satisfied. But our faith will never be satisfied with that. Our faith has a conscience of its own and an experience for its own self, and we naturally oppress it. We naturally oppress it and think that we are doing justice by doing so. But we have an option. And this is a revelation, because this is insane to think about. Us existing outside of institutionalized understanding is sort of like us existing on another planet and yet still being able to function and do whatever we do on a daily basis. It's just weird to think about. And so this chapter 10, opens up with a paragraph citing the goodness of the soul, or the goodness for the soul, that it is wisdom. And that this wisdom is the labor of the righteous, and that the labor of the righteous tendeth to life. And what's cool about this is that when you go to the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7 and verse 12, that verse tells you that wisdom gives life to them that have it. So here you have the proverb saying that the labor of the righteous tends to life. And then you have in Ecclesiastes, it says that wisdom gives life. So the labor of the true conversation is a labor for wisdom. In both scenarios, life is the end or outcome or the result. That labor for that same life in both scenarios is wisdom. So the Bible's pointing us to the secret of our personal devotional conversations, well-being. And then that first paragraph in this 10th chapter ends with the proverb that says, fools die for want of wisdom. And of course, I'm sure we know by now that this death is not literal. But then again, this same death ties into the next chapter, perfect and entire, wanting nothing. So when we are not feeding our faith's conscience, we are left in a condition of wanting, or as the writer says, of dying for wisdom. Then you go into the second paragraph and it begins with a quote suggesting that understanding is the wellspring of life. And this is completely contrary to what we know, because our religious culture, according to this verse, is misleading and has been misleading us. Understanding is the wellspring of life. Our denominational understanding tells us that the wellspring of life relies on personages and figures. And so within the personages and figures is the life. But if in Ecclesiastes we're told that wisdom gives life, and in the Proverbs we're told that the labor of the righteous tendeth to life, and then again we're told that understanding is the wellspring of life, the common denominator of all of this is wisdom. And even Paul, in this 5th paragraph of this 10th chapter, allows us to know from a quote that the living God would have us enriched in knowledge. Why? Why all of this about wisdom? Why all of this about wisdom? Because when you cut away Genesis to Malachi and all you're left with is Matthew to Revelation, you won't know this at all. In its rawest sense, you'll find it, but you won't find it in its rawest sense. And it is absolutely raw from Genesis to Malachi. The point being is that the philosophy within the scriptures has everything to do with the conversation receiving health via wisdom. Meaning that what the conversation goes through, the conversation is to use as a tool for instruction to correct itself so that it can receive principles of well-being to live by. Our conversation is to be receiving principles of well-being to live by. The main source of that, the Bible has put into one word for that wellspring to live by. It is called Emmanuel. And if you've been, following along on my program on the Preach the Word Network, justification, at this point in time, and even prior, but it's just necessary again to review the aspect of Emmanuel as being the center, of that new covenant promise. And Emmanuel being the intercessor or the highway for our faith to take to the living God's devotional character. It is Emmanuel that, when studied, is supposed to give us the wisdom our faith needs in order for it to work for us. A faith that works is the intention of the Bible's philosophy. Because our conversation is to be helped or healed through wisdom. And in the 7th paragraph, it is correction that is pointed out as being the key to that healing process. When we talk about wisdom, when we talk about knowledge and understanding, we're talking about a process of correction. We don't know the Bible's philosophy as we ought. What we know is what we are denominationally trained to believe. And again, when we enter into that, this is the associated practice to not abandon and to believe that this is that life we are supposed to live. When we enter into that. So we don't know anything different than we feel something that allows us to know that the scriptures are for us. We enter into whatever we enter into. We land into a assembly that we land into. We trust its landscape. We believe its landscape is the intended operation. But at a point in time, our faith is still going to call out to us and tell us that it has an operation of its own that it must know. And so the battle will again be there. Will we remain or will we depart? Bible tells us, depart ye, touch not the unclean thing. We don't know that what we are naturally in is unclean. But the Bible's, from beginning to end, perspective or point of view is about a conversation resurrected. And in order for that conversation to be resurrected, that means it has to be in a ground of filth. We don't know that where our faith is born is a ground of filth. And we can either remain under the ground of filth, or we can allow our faith to experiment with its experience to rise up from out of that ground of filth and be renewed, as Paul says, in the spirit of its mind. And in paragraph 10, we are told that this is actually the intended birth. This is the intended birth that the scriptures would have us chase, grow familiar with. The conception that is inward, the conception that is mental. The labor of obtaining wisdom is the present work for that birth or for that conversation's conscience when it comes to conception. And this is something key that we have to understand or at least accept, because then we will be able to step aside from out of what we hold to be dear to allow our faith to know real. We can go through our experience and we can read whatever we read in the Bible and we can hear whatever we hear of the Bible, we can go through our experience and take nothing of it. There are even times when I'm studying the scriptures, and I come across something maybe 10 years after the fact of first reading that verse, and it's revolutionary. And it wasn't revolutionary at that point in time, but 5-10 years later, it's absolutely revolutionary. And it's revolutionary because the process of maintaining an understanding of what I've been reviewing has finally clicked. When we allow our faith to have its moment of clicking, its aha moment, when we allow our faith to go through that, we allow our faith to have the space that it needs for developing a culture that it can depend on. And we don't really realize it, but our faith is an entity of its own. We don't own it. We don't own our faith's entity. Our faith is an entity and has a character of its own, one of which that we did not give it. So we do not have the right to retain it as if we own it. We don't own that life. We don't own that life. To pay homage to the giver of that life, we dedicate what we have received to the sphere of which it came from and of which it can be fed, which is words, and which is putting words to use, and putting words to use for an experience, and putting words to use for an experience for wisdom, putting words to use for an experience for wisdom, so that we may have correction for understanding how our faith ought to live, so that we can let our faith live how it ought. And so this chapter is pointing to something very crucial. It's pointing to the liberty of our faith's conscience. It's pointing to the realization that our faith has to exist, and that if it will not, we, in a sense, because our faith instructs our human being, will not exist. Everything is pointing to our human condition and for the growth and development of our human being when it comes to the Bible. To get at our human being, a philosophy from without it has to come within it. Well, the Creator, the mind inspiring the Bible, has given us a philosophy called Emmanuel. And this philosophy is a wisdom that, when placed into the human being, corrects it, not immediately, not in one day, not in 1 week, not in 1 year, not in 10 years, not in 15, 20, 40, 50 years. It is an ongoing process to heal the years of our prior ignorance. And it is all for the sake of our human beings' well-being. Getting our faith's conscience right means getting the conscience of our human being right, which means allowing us to be useful in the time that we have on this planet. And a big part of that is us surrendering to the labor of wisdom. Us allowing our faith to be uncomfortable with the scriptures for the purpose of wisdom. Receiving that wisdom, we have material to weigh with the environment that we have been conceived in, and it will always be that what we weigh will show imbalance. That imbalance will awaken us to where we are spiritually and to where we need to be, meaning to where our faith must envision itself as having itself managed. And in that vision, the vision of how our faith envisions itself being managed, that is an aim for us to aim forward to look forward to, as we bring our experience to the mind that gave it to us.